Hello, Cyclocross friends, and thanks for tuning in to episode 362 of Cyclocross Radio. On this episode, Adam Myerson is back, and he is here to have a conversation following the post that I did on the CXHAIRS Bulletin a few days ago called, it was a redo of Lies, Damn Lies, and Cyclocross, where I went through a lot of statistics about the 2025 season and before that, and just where the state of cyclocross is right now according to the numbers. And there was a lot to dig into in that article that we touched on in our conversation, just and mixed into that. And what I love about having Adam on, and I actually talked to him about the article before I wrote it, is just that he's been doing this for so long. He's been involved in cyclocross since the 80s and been racing since that time. So just his perspective is hugely important to dive into what we have now versus what there was, and just all the cycles that came. And he talks about cycles in our conversation between it. So we'll just get into that, and you can hear for yourselves. We are going to follow it up, I think, later, maybe in a month, and talk about nationals, because we had so much to talk to. We talked for over an hour and really didn't even touch on the national championship picture of it, which I think is important as well. If you are watching this on YouTube, thank you. If you are listening to it, you are doing it on both of those platforms through the Wide Angle Podium Podcast Network. It is an independent cycling media network. I would love for you to become a member by going to wideanglepodium.com. We have this show. We have Grodio. Amanda is starting to get things rolling. I'm seeing what's happening in our Grodio inbox and guests that she's going to have on. It's going to be a lot of exciting things there. So if you're into that gravel scene or even gravel curious, check out that podcast. Zach and the boys still doing a Nowhere Fast, so check out their virtual racing podcast. Rob has just been crushing the Criterium scene with Criterium Nation, so make sure that you are subscribed to that. And as always, the Slow Ride podcast, the queen of the Wide Angle Podcast Network, the Queen Stage. They're still going strong. Love it. Go check out all the shenanigans over on Slow Ride, and also at the Wide Angle Podium Podcast Network. All right. Chatting with Adam Myerson. Always love having Adam on. And we're talking about statistics and the scene and where it stands and maybe what we can do and why it is the way it is. And we're going to get into that conversation right now. Adam, here's my question for you. When I mention the band Talk, what springs to mind for you?
I feel like just that one
popular
song. Yeah, I couldn't tell you another song by them, honestly.
I think Take My Life was another one.
Yeah.
And I think this was 84, I think. Yeah. That 82 maybe that those came out around there. It's like early high school, middle school for me. I know you're a couple years under that. So I was just looking around for new music, and there were these places that just kept recommending Talk. And I'm like, why am I going to listen to Talk? It's like at that point, it was like 84, 85. Like I'm listening to the Smiths. I'm listening to the Replacements. I'm listening to Husker Du. I'm not listening to Talk. So I go and I find these albums, and this guy like Mark Hollis, who was head of it, and he just basically was like, I'm not going to be a pop star anymore. And he put out these albums, or they did after that I think even like in 87. So I completely missed it. Like in the heyday of when I was like so deep into music and would have never listened to this. I'm listening to these albums now, and they're so good. And they're just out there, and they're sort of like these just sort of noodling explorations, almost like Radiohead-ish like type stuff. I was like, how did I miss this? Like, what happened in here that I missed this? And I only bring this up because I'm just thinking about my age. I'm thinking about Gen X. I'm thinking about all of this stuff after doing this deep dive into like statistics and cyclocross and stuff. And it's like that same age group, like the people that I can have this conversation with are the same people who are like the heart of cyclocross right now.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. It's funny how there are holes like that, as you know, we're both music fans, and probably you're a completist in some for some bands too, like I am. And then things get by you. And you discover those holes, and then you can spend a month filling that gap, going down that rabbit hole, which I really enjoy. Like you don't have to listen to new music. You can keep filling in the gaps from the things, you know, the periods that you like. I do that all the time. It's always fun when that happens.
So go listen to Spirit of Eden by Talk Talk. Right. Just give it a little cursory glance, see what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I like that new wave era. I like lots of music from there.
Yeah, but it's just like completely different. Yeah. Anyway, we should start recording this episode, or maybe we already have. So before I wrote that article, that was a journey. Just with releasing it with wrong data and then having to go back and scrape everything and fix it. And I think it definitely.
I think I texted you.
Yeah,
I texted you and said, "God bless your inbox today."
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
And it's kind of funny because I want to get to the other thing. I know you were concerned about it just in the overall sense, but it's also what you brought up in that is a really interesting point in this that I'll get to. But before all that happened, I had this other article that I had written, and it was more of like this personal narrative about like my journey in cyclocross, and a lot of that was formed from a conversation that you and I had. It had to be like 2 or 3 months ago, I think, maybe January. I think it was like January. It was after I was back from nationals, not nationals, curse period. And just going into, because, you know, sort of thinking about this stuff, and it was after nationals and just kind of like a little down after that. You know, I just didn't think it was what it used to be. And that's kind of the theme. And we were talking about it, and we started talking about like who was still in cyclocross. And I was talking about how I was in my 30s when I got into cyclocross, and when I got into it, you know, what am I now? 57. And it seems like I'm still in the biggest demographic, and looking at the numbers, I am. And I was talking to you, and I was like, it seemed like it got really popular when I got in. And it was such an egocentric way of looking at this. And you were like, well, it was still the biggest field when I was racing as a junior. So, you know, I think, as I put it to you at that time, when I got onto the subway car, it was already full. You know, you all had already been like here with this huge group that was coming up, and then I was just in that same age range and kind of jumped on to the biggest field at the time. And that conversation that we had, you know, was, I don't know. I mean, we can talk about it now, but you just had this great insight on where cyclocross was, like when you started, and then through the 90s and into the 2000s, and then up to like, I think Worlds, which I think we both agreed was kind of Louisville was almost the peak. I think it grew a little bit after that, from that momentum up to about 2016, and then sort of, you know, been leveling out and a little decline from there.
Yeah, for sure. That's right.
I don't even know what my question is for you, Adam. I just like,
well, let's I don't know when that population curve peak occurred to me, but it's a thing that it's on my mind a lot, and it's on my mind because I'm in the center of that, right? And yeah, I mean, I've been in the sport now since the late 80s, and I have started to understand that I've been here through a whole bunch of cycles now. It's Groundhog Day all the time, and I joke about that all the time too, you know, like, and that's been happening for a while. And I think I'll be 54 this year. I think that's part of aging, right? Where we've been doing whatever it is that we do for long enough now that if we're experts in whatever our field is, we've seen some cycles, and I feel old, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'm realizing that even though I feel very young, I view things through having seen things tried and failed or tried and succeeded. I see people coming with new ideas that are not only old ideas, it's like the third time we're trying that idea. And I'm trying to figure out how to like leave the kids space to take over the reins. And it also makes me realize about myself as someone who started organizing races young and thought, came into the sport young and said, oh, I think it should go this way. I'm going to run a race because I don't want to tell them what to do. I'm just going to do it. That's 80s punk DIY mentality, right? Like I can do this, or I can improve on this, and dumb enough to try, right? So, but my demographic, we came into the sport through Greg LeMond. We were Greg LeMond fans. That was the cycling boom that we started racing in, or at least that I started racing in. That I don't know if that population curve matches like the general population. I mean, population has just been getting bigger, right? Until recently, I think like birth rates are going down, but there's a cycling peak there from the LeMond years that extended into the Lance years. Those of us that got into it through LeMond benefited from the boom that happened during Lance. And then we're lifers. We just kept racing. And as you mentioned in the article, we were elites, and then we were masters, and now we're 50 plus masters. And I certainly have observed the growth of the like 9 to 12 and 13, 14, 15, 16 age groups. That, of course, I'm just making this up, but seems to me that it's the kids of the 50 plus riders. I had my kid a lot later than some of my peers because I raced through those years where they had jobs and raising families. I was still racing my bike, but yeah, our kids are racing now, right? And I see this next an echo of that age group happening, which gives me some hope in this downturn,
Yeah, I think that the unfortunate thing is a lot of people in that age range, when their kids that they were bringing to races. So my kids are 18 and 21. I thought I was an old parent. I guess I'm not.
Right. My kid's 10. I was 43. I mean, I didn't have to birth him, so that helped, right. But yeah.
But the problem with that group was they really got nailed by the pandemic when they were all in that really critical junior to U23 age group. And I think we lost a lot of them there, where there was this key development stage and sort of boom, and those were gone, and we're just trying to sort of backfill with the kids that are out there now. And I know it still exists, and that's almost one of the, not to jump around too much here, but that's one of the, I think, pushes and pulls that we're up against and have always been up against in what do we do with the sport. After I put that article out, I followed up by the survey, and now I'm getting all these survey results, which was really cool, because I mean, a lot of people responded. It's like I got like 250, 300 responses from this, which is awesome. You won't be surprised that the responses are the same demographic that are racing. It's all plus 50. Right. It's 90% male. These are the issues that we have there. But a lot of just to get to the junior thing, a lot of the comments are like, we need to make this more attractive for juniors. We need to, not put them at the first of the day, and not do this and not do that. If you want to attract juniors, you have to make it more attractive. Not to gild a lily, but but when I was looking at this, and a lot of the things that people bring up all the time, they're like, well, NICA, make it like NICA. And my thought of that is that, and I wonder if you have an answer to this, it's really hard because we're in a position where we want to combine at the local level, at the grassroots level, we want to combine beer league softball with NICA and have it all work in the same day. The great thing about NICA, the great thing about, before you were here, you were at soccer practice for your kid. The great thing about youth soccer, the great thing about Little League,
no adults.
It is just for kids. There are no adults there. We don't have to work in an adult schedule to a Little League game.
That's right. We've been talking about this. Yeah, I've been having this conversation. Yeah. I've been having this conversation a lot. I mean, you're hitting on the thing. So like to tie this in, one of the lines that stood out to me most in the article, I reread it today before we talked, and I made a couple little notes so I would remember these things. But when I reread it again, you had kept this line in, and the quote was, "It's quite possible the return to grassroots cyclocross already happened without anyone noticing." And I was like, I have noticed. We're noticing. Like, you are 100% right. And so I want to talk about that because I think your graphs show it. And the new approach has to keep in mind like where we are in actuality, not where we want to be, not what we used to do, but maybe what did it look like before we had a national UCI cyclocross series, right? And when I was racing cross in the late 80s and early 90s, before we had UCI races at all, what did that look like? And how did we grow the scene in that context? And I'd love to talk about that today. The NICA thing in New England, it's NEYC. We're having active conversations about, can there be an NEYC cyclocross league? And, my kid is on an NEYC mountain bike team now and is going to mountain bike practices and is interested in NEYC. And the problem is, and I know what I sound like when I say this, but the problem is there isn't a race for me. And so, and that's not a problem. That's a problem for us as a parent and child who go to races together. We are picking the races that we can both compete at. And then we have a great day together, and I can support him, and then he gets to play with his friends. And I don't want him to miss out on 500, 600 rider NEYC races. And I don't think the solution is for them to add an adult race, right? Yeah. Like, that's why it works.
Because it's like when I was playing basketball, like dads weren't taking their kids to the pickup game.
And cycling is different, right?
Cycling is just completely different. Where that's where we're
And it's both a positive and a negative. And it's a positive because we can make it a family activity where everybody gets to participate. It's a negative because have you met 50 plus men? Like they're ruining the experience for other people simply by being there. And so I don't want to ruin NEYC by having them add a race that I can do, even though that would be more fun for me and Flynn, right?
Yeah.
And I think the problem we've been having talks with NEYC about, could we have a fall cyclocross league? Because in New England, youth mountain bike is a spring only activity. They don't have a fall season. So could fall be the season? Well, it could be. It's more work for Kelly maybe. And we're not necessarily, we recognize that, right? Everybody wants to chip in to make this work. But here's the problem. We already have races every weekend that exist. And we're even seeing that on a mountain bike side where we have the race day series that's trying to be a professional mountain bike series. And they're scheduling on top of NICA because there's only so many weekends. That's not great. But if I was trying to run a professional mountain bike series, I would want those junior entry fees too. So I'm not part of that conversation, but I'm observing that, and it doesn't look like a great idea to me. But in the fall, if we wanted to have an NEYC cyclocross season as a way to keep those kids racing and giving them something else to do in the fall, is that going to impact the pre-existing races that we already have? Because we do still have in New England a pretty, I won't call it full. It's not like the old days. Maybe it's good that we don't have 6 races on a weekend, which we sometimes did back in the day. But we don't want to take entries away from pre-existing organizers. And so a nice way to do it would be to bring in the NEYC into some of these existing races, but that's not the vibe, right? That's not what's successful about it now. So I don't know what the right approach is there.
Yeah, I don't either. When I was running the Mid-Atlantic series, I and we got to a point, and it was great, where we would have like 80 juniors. I mean, they may still now, but the numbers got, closing in on triple digits. And I had one of the moms who was kind of organizing one of the teams. She said, you need to give us better start times. Like, we're the majority of your day now. And I was like, well, you still kind of, at the end of it, I don't charge much. So you're still kind of costing me money. So it's not, let's put all this into perspective. And the second thing is, this is an adult first series. That's how this started. And it's awesome that the kids are here. This tension that we're feeling, I want them there. But at the same time, I can't make this into a day that is catered towards juniors like every other youth league. And then the people who love this sport and built up the sport are kind of like second class citizens. And it is like, I can't make that happen. And her response was, well, this was the conversation that, I don't know, years ago, I had this reputation of hating juniors, which is kind of funny for starting a Devo team and all that kind of stuff. But regardless, what her threat was, we'll just take all these juniors and start our own league. And I was like, I'll be the first one there. Let's do it. I'll help. What can we do? And that wasn't a response she was looking for. This was.
Yeah.
I was like, this sounds like an awesome idea. This solves everything. You figure out how to do it and I will support you 1000%. But I'm not sure how you do it, because then, like we just talked about, the parents want to race. And then if they become cyclocross parents predominantly, it sort of takes away from why they got their kids into the sport, because they could all race together. It's a really hard.
Yeah, right. And I would hate to that is a big part of my enjoyment, right? It's a shared, my child has chosen my passion. And I'm doing everything I can not to ruin that, right? To just like make it available to him and not put my aspirations onto him. And it's very hard not to do that, especially as a coach. But I'm so afraid of that I work really hard to just, and I'm sure I'm screwing it up all the time, but it's important. I know that it would be very easy for me to ruin cycling for him, right? So I'm trying hard not to do that. But that said, we have a great day when we can go to the race together and spend the day there. And there's something there for both of us. And I do want that to continue.
But does that mean then that we need these more like 30-year-olds back in the sport, though?
Well, I'll go back and say, you've probably done this too, but I have changed my junior race start times. I agree with that mom, right?
Yeah.
So,
I don't want to put them at 7 a.m. for sure. But
right, and the races, some of the races do still put them at 7:30 in the morning, and the races don't ever need to start that early. But also, like, my kid's school doesn't start until 9 o'clock in the morning, right? Like, and he had to be like at the start line at 7:30. No, like, that's the future of the sport. We have to recruit there right now. Yes, we do need the 20 plus riders too, but I see this 9 to 12 category. Of course I'm paying attention to it because my kid's in it, right? Like, let's be honest about that. But as a race organizer, I wasn't paying as much attention to it. And I even got stuck. I was still doing a Cub Junior race that was 2 laps when everybody else had moved to 30 minutes for the 9 to 12s. And I had missed it. I didn't notice. And I had parents messaging me like, hey, why is your race 2 laps? I was like, what do you mean? It's been 2 laps for 20 years. And they're like, yeah, right. I was like, oh, right. The kids are fast now. 9 to 12s aren't beginners even anymore. Like, they're good. They ride. So I find that 15, 16s and 17, 18s don't want to race junior races unless they're big, unless they're championships, unless there's something at stake. They want to race with the adults. They care about their cross results ranking. They want to race the biggest, best field they can. And so we barely even need starts for 15, 16s and 17, 18s. It's better to let them race within another category and then give them a podium and recognize them. But they don't want it. It's hard for me to accept that because I want to do everything for the juniors and I want to give them a race. That's not what they want. Cross results has changed what they want. They care about, they don't want to do a low cross results junior race, right?
Yeah. Well, I took that out of DCCX this year. So which had been, we went back. It was a local race for the last couple of years. So there was a U19 race, and since we had UCI juniors, I did not have a non-UCI U19 race, and I probably got more emails about that than anything else. And every parent that would email me about it saying what happened to the U19, I was like, this is an amazing opportunity for them to race their category. They can race the Cat 4s.
To remind them they can do that.
And it's really good, and they're going to do fine. And no one like pushed back on it. They were like, okay, sounds good.
It doesn't even occur to some of them, but I find that the young athletes that I coach, they want to race their category, not their age group. But the 9 to 12s and the 13, 14s aren't necessarily ready to do that. And there are a lot of them. And so I've been putting them, they're at noon now. Mm-hmm. They're in the middle of the day. And part of why I like putting them in the middle of the day is it's easier on the parents. The middle of the day means a parent who, if their parents are racing, it doesn't matter what category their parent is. If it's for me, if I'm doing the elite race and the kids race is first, I'm there for the first race and the last day. And that is not a great day for me. If you put that race at noon, every parent can access that maybe more easily. And also, everyone loves that race. Everyone loves watching the 9 to 12s. I just feel like it makes everybody happy watching that race. Everybody's excited to watch it. So I think from a spectator standpoint, I like having that race in the middle of the day.
Is there any, so if we're moving the 9 to 12-year-old races duration wise, making them longer, making them 30 minutes.
Yeah, 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
Because those kids are fast. Does that in any way, are we scared at all that that's going to stop new riders from coming in? That much like any other sport now, you're 12 and you want to get into the sport, sorry, that ship's already left.
No, because kids are still getting started like in college. Like they get started when they get started. And getting started early is not a guarantee of future success. And that's well documented. There's a study that was going around recently. I probably could have had it handy if I was thinking about it, but I'm paying so much attention to soccer now, and I'm learning a lot from how soccer development works and all the mistakes they've made and the adjustments they're making and how they do soccer development. And, soccer has for a long time had the model of, the biggest teams in the world have academies, right? They have development teams like cycling has started to, all the way down to the 8 and 9-year-olds, right? To like youth soccer, you can be in an academy at the youth soccer level. Well, traditionally, who got the attention at that level? It's the kids who were ahead on puberty, right? Well, the kids over the years they've seen, and the study that came out recently showed this, that like, not a surprise that the kids who were just ahead on puberty and then got all the resources as 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds didn't necessarily become professionals. The kids who had the most success in the future as professionals were the kids who played multiple sports, who didn't specialize until they were at least older than 13. They continued to play multiple sports at least until 13, sometimes 13, 14, beyond that. And they played at a lower level and learned more skills and became better athletes. Those athletes became professionals when they did specialize at a higher percentage than the kids who specialized early. So Flynn knows this. I showed him this study, and it's helped him stay committed to soccer and continue to do two things, even though in his head he's decided cycling's what he wants to do. He is going to soccer still because he has decided that's part of his path to becoming a better cyclist. And who am I to argue with that? I think I don't need my 10-year-old picking a sport, right?
My favorite, I think, when these studies started coming out, my favorite example was Roger Federer, whose mom was a tennis coach, whose mom did not let him play tennis,
right?
Refused to let him play tennis, and he played football, and he played every other sport out there, and then finally, was allowed to dabble. It's the dabbler versus the specialist. Exactly what you're saying. My whole thing is like, there still needs to be like an entry point, clinics, all that kind of stuff. And it goes along with this whole bigger picture that we're talking about when you especially, but even by the time that I got into cycling, it was still a club-based sport that it really, I'm sure there are many pockets, and I'm sure people will tell us about their great clubs, and that's awesome, but it's definitely less than it was at one point. Even USA Cycling used to be a requirement.
Yeah, you had to put a race on.
People didn't like it when it was happening, but at the same time,
we lost a lot when that requirement went away. Right. And I understood the desire to professionalize race promotion, but that has not worked out. And they wanted to remove barriers to entry to the sport where like you should be able to join a club without being obligated to put a race on. But all that did is, now we have 6-person sponsored masters teams, right? That was the net effect.
I mean, I had to pay, unattached fees when I started.
Right. What's tricky about this conversation and about all conversations like this, and where I sometimes start tripping over my own thoughts, is like galaxy brain explosion of like, how do I, for the folks who are listening who either are new to cross or maybe only have, even if you have 10 years in the sport at this point, when you and I are having this conversation, how do I add the context of, well, here's what was happening in the 80s when I joined the sport as a teenager, and how that developed into what was happening in the 90s where cyclocross started to grow, but we didn't have a national series. You raced in your own region only, except for nationals, unless you went to Switzerland. And back then it was Switzerland. It wasn't Belgium. Paul Curley went to Switzerland. The McCormicks went to Switzerland. I went to Switzerland. We all followed Paul Curley's lead and had connections there that still exist to this day, which led to us having UCI races finally in the late 90s, which led to the Super Cup, which eventually led to the Grand Prix, like sorry, I'm blanking right now on the name of this next series. We started having national series, and then we had a national calendar, where like New England and Mid-Atlantic, we had UCI races every weekend. And then I showed all the other organizers in the other regions how to also do that. And now we have a national series, which culminates in that peak with Worlds. Like Northampton's biggest turnout was in 2016. That was our, like 1,800 riders was the most that we had. But that's, I think of the peak as 2015, 2016, and it's sort of declined since then. But yeah, how do I get people to understand? Do they know about Ann Knapp? You know what I mean? Do they know about Gina Hall? Do they know about the Cliff Bar team? Do they know about Peter Wedge? Do they know about when Saturn was sponsoring cyclocross and had professional cyclocross riders? Do they know about the Presidio Nationals and Super Cup finals? Some people think that's the peak of US cyclocross, and that is a supportable argument. Imagine the Presidio, cyclocross in the Presidio. Like it was incredible. So that's the Groundhog Day part for me. And when I think about your article, which I'm so grateful for, and I'm so glad that you did it. Someone needed to do it. You're one of the only people qualified to do it. I'm glad that you connected with Colin at Cross Results, because anytime I have a data, I don't try to figure it out myself. I send him a message because I know he can. It's like I probably could work on my own car, but it would be better if I paid someone to do it. That's Colin takes care of the data. And then for you to, I was worried you were going to give up on it, and I was so glad that you revised it and published, because it was we needed it, and it was useful, and the graphs are helpful. What I come away with when I read it is, what are the things that stand out for me? One, like the lack of, there are no pro cyclocross riders right now, or barely any, because there's no pro cyclocross teams right now, or barely any, because there's no sponsors for cyclocross right now. We still have races. We still have a national series of national calendar of UCI races. But look, a C2 prize list is $1,500. A C1 prize list is it like $8,000? What is it right now in dollars? Yeah. When I was an amateur in the 90s racing on the road, I could do a $10,000 criterium every weekend, and I could live off my prize money, whether I had team support or not. If I had a team when I was trying to turn pro, just giving me a stipend and enough money to get from race to race, I could make $1,000 a week in prize money. I could win a couple preems, get top 10. You know, of course you have to be good enough to do that, but like I wasn't winning all the races, but I was good enough to make a living off prize money. You could even do that for a little while in cyclocross in the US. And right now you can't, because the prize lists aren't going up. Even on the crits, we've been racing for 10 grand for 30 years, right? It's still 10 grand. So it's, you know, you can't really live off that like you once could. But I see the crit scene. I always like to compare it to the crit scene. Like there isn't a professional crit scene right now, but there are a bunch of people racing crits full time and making money right now in a way that isn't happening in cyclocross. It's kind of gone the other way. So I look at that. I think about, how do we bring new people into the sport right now if we don't, if there's the death of that big event, right? The big event is what, you know, like when I ran the New England Cyclocross Series and eight UCI races, 4 weekends, exactly like you said, like this is a Richard Freeze quote about like, you can't go to a Patriots game and play like flag football in the stadium at Gillette before the Patriots game. You get to do that in cyclocross, right? You get to do your amateur race and then you get to watch the pros. That is special. That's unique. Well, when we don't have the big races, you don't get to do that. So when we had 8 UCI races in New England every weekend, even the local races, the non-UCI races, the off weekends, the level of those races was so high because people were used to a standard from having so many UCI races. And now Northampton's the last UCI weekend left in New England. We had 14 UCI races in New England at one point. So in that void, how do we rebuild the sport in that space? And that's the question that your article is asking. And I also appreciated that you didn't answer it. You brought the data and you posed the question. And
believe
you
me,
said,
that was the hard part from all of it.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Opinionated and not making conclusions.
It was so good because people would have been distracted by your conclusions. And I think it was important for them to just look at your analysis and be free to have a conversation about it after, which you and I are having now. And I expect everybody has been having. So I'll tell you one thing that I've focused on is my weekly cross workout. I want to come at this from both ends. I want to still have a UCI race. There should still be something big for people to aspire to. We could have a whole separate conversation about trans exclusion from those events and why that makes that hard, a difficult choice and a less than perfect solution. That's a separate podcast. It's so important to me, but it's too big of a sidetrack right now, I guess. But it's not, I'm not ignoring it, even if I'm not going deep on that right now. That's always present for me. That's the one end. On the other end, I'm doing this Wednesday workout. It's not even a training race, right? I just am trying to get people together to do a workout together where I can do a little casual coaching and give people some tips and get people stoked. And this is where, like, if we're going to bring gravel racers in, the gravel racers are finding out about my practice, and they're coming to my practice and they're bringing their gravel bikes and doing the workout, just like the mountain bikers did in the 90s. You know, a big part of the cross boom in the 90s was from mountain bikers crossing over and then getting cyclocross bikes because they were like, oh, this is faster and more fun on a cross bike. Maybe that won't happen with gravel, but I don't care. They race cross on your gravel bike. I just want you here, right? I want you stoked on the short track gravel.
Yeah, so, there was definitely this contingent of people, and I saw it in the mountain bikers who left mountain biking once they thought, you know, mountain biking, just all the roadies were in there, right? All the lycra bros were starting to race mountain bikes, you know, Norba and all that kind of stuff. And after that, where it got like super serious, and they found cyclocross because they were like, well, this is when we used to go to mountain bike races and hang out in the grass and camp out and weren't really that serious about racing, and had some beers and partied some, and it was an awesome time. And look at this over here. This is kind of like that. We're going to do this now. And then it kind of, you know, it's always that, you know, biting the hand that feeds. Then it got serious, and those, you know, a couple of those people were like, hey, I need a pit bike. Hey, I'm a Cat 4, but I need 2 pit bikes, you know. And then that kind of like drove those people out from that. And when I did this survey, that's a lot of the comments. People want that back. They want just this kind of family fun atmosphere. But what we can't forget on this, and this was something that we really harped on again when I was a lot more involved in Mabra and the Mid-Atlantic and cyclocross, my mantra for the races in the series was professional production values, grassroots racing.
100%. Yes. And we share that completely. Yes.
That's
absolutely.
what you need. Yeah. It's the same way that, like this garage race that I put on, which is like the most professional event that I do, from being insured to the gills to working with the business improvement district and having, the health department come there and doing checks. It's like all of this stuff that people don't see. What they see is Fight Club. And they're like, this is fun. We got to go hang out in a parking garage and race our bikes. And this is like the most subversive underground thing. And that's what you want. You want to create that, yet at the same time, sort of trick people into having this great experience with this great production that just is kind of there, that they're not even seeing, but it makes the experience so much better. And that was one of the things that was reflected in there that I think that races may have gotten away from. And I am sympathetic towards that costs money.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you pay for that? Right. Yeah, right. And I'm having a big problem right now I'm glad for the grassroots races, and I've lowered my expectations. I've had to adjust myself. If I'm going to the local race, I'm just happy that it's happening. I want to know what time the race is and how much it costs, and can Flynn and I do it together, and is it easy to get there? And I'm not criticizing courses. Organizers ask me for help and I will give it, but I don't complain. If there's something about the course that I was like, this is janky, it shouldn't be this way, I don't complain. It's a local race, so my expectations are different. It's fine. I'm so grateful to have a race. I'm glad someone's keeping the sport going. I think the PMCX series in Connecticut was a good example of like, so grateful for the races that they put on and the way they put them on. That we were driving 2 hours from Boston down to Connecticut most of the time when they had a race, because they would fit our schedule, and we just had a good time there. And I like the people that organize the race. I like what they're trying to do. It's not a UCI production, and I don't go there with those kind of expectations. It's a lot of new organizers, and those new organizers would say, hey, what do you think of the course? And I'm very careful about the feedback that I give. You could adjust this a little bit different, or, take a look at this next year. Like there's no criticism in it. What I will say generally, I think this really happened in the pandemic, but the pandemic killed expertise. It killed the passing on of knowledge and expertise. It cut lines. A lot of information stopped. Organizers who didn't come back took. Paul Boudreau is a great example, the organizer of Gloucester, right? Like, how much does Paul know? How much has, unfortunately, like, if Paul's not running a race and he's not training someone to pass his event on, to have run an event like Gloucester, and I know if Paul hears this, he's sad about this too, so I'm sorry, Paul. I don't mean to make Paul feel bad about it. He's also upset about this, but like, what a resource. People don't know who Paul is. And this happens all the time too, like at cross camp, when I'm introducing the coaches and people don't know who Ellen Noble is, or Stephen Hyde, or Jeremy Powers, or Al Donahue. And that's my coaching staff. And that is the golden age of US cyclocross. And they're all right there at my camp. But the campers don't know who these folks are because the sport didn't carry that on. So that happens at some of the local races where this is again a Groundhog Day, where I feel like I have to have a meeting with all like the New England organizers to say, hey, look, you got to stop making the races short, or you got like, they're things that we litigated 20 years ago. They're relitigating. They're making all these mistakes, and it turns me into the old man shaking my fist at the clouds. But I want to be helpful and say, oh, we don't do it that way because, and it sounds ridiculous when it is, but like, in 1995, we used to do it that way, and we stopped doing it that way because of A, B, and C. And yes, it's okay to try new things or even to try old things again, but here's why that didn't work, and it's not going to work again. And here's actually what would work better. We've already fixed this. Well, they don't know that. They're new organizers, and I'm glad that they're there. They don't even know maybe they don't even, it sounds ridiculous. I hate saying this sense, but like, they don't know who I am. So how are they they don't know what I even know. And this is what I said at the beginning. How do I even explain that? Like, how many cycles have I watched? That's hard for me because I want to just help, and I don't want that experience to just get wasted. I want to pass on. It's why I became a coach in the first place.
Well, even to this. So when we had that first conversation, one of the things that I went back to, and it was even in this first draft of this article that I had, was just going through the history, going through the first UCI race in Colorado that did some research on, which was awesome, and I'm blanking on the Dutch guy who won, who was
Peter van den Abele. So,
yeah, exactly.
So yes. So the thing that I said to you is, and for people who don't know, so yeah, that first cross race was 96 in Meade, Colorado. Chris Grealish ran it. People don't even know that race happened. Peter van den Abele came from Belgium and raced it. Peter van den Abele went on to be the head of cyclocross.
Dutch guy.
Well, yeah, is he?
I think he's
no, he's Belgian.
Yeah,
he's Belgian.
But he was like huge in the UCI. He was the guy that did pay equity for women.
I was on the cross commission. I was on the UCI cross commission when he was the head of cyclocross at the UCI. He was in charge of the modernization of cyclocross program that started in 2000, which is part of how I ended up on the cross commission. I was part of that. There was a very specific program in 2000 that was a reaction to the popularity of mountain biking and the influence it was having on cyclocross to modernize cyclocross. And that was an intentional program by the UCI. I spent 4 years on the cross commission working with Peter on that. Peter was at that race. He raced the first UCI race. And now he's the head of all competition at the UCI, not just cyclocross. He is perhaps the most important person other than the president of the UCI at the UCI right now. He's a cyclocross rider.
Yeah. Beat Pete Weber in that race.
So how many people who race cyclocross know in the US that there was a UCI? They don't know who Chris Grealish is, and they should. He's a legend. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Chris, So do they know about Mark Gullickson and Boulder Denver Couriers? Like,
that's the thing. It was like Colorado had this huge mark, and it's I know we have like Boulder Cup now and then. Hopefully it stays around, but yeah, it's such a deep history there, and it just kind of, you're right. It sort of gets forgotten. And the other, I just want to throw this out there too. And again, I should just go back and just write the parts that you were telling me about the whole history, just about the evolution of what a race looked like even at the UCI level, when you're like, team tents, I think you were saying we're probably a Pacific Northwest
Cross Crusade. Yeah. That
Cross
came from
Crusade.
Crusade.
Yeah. Like nobody had it.
We learned that from them. Well, they had weather. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you were just changing in the back of your car and in your trunk in the parking lot. And the sort of the race, the paddock was all in the parking lot, and it wasn't. And the great thing that happens now is having a tent row and is having that community right next to the course. And that completely changed the sport. And then, from that, we got these bigger teams. We had that era you were talking about with all of your coaches that were bringing in, I mean, even before that, we're talking about Saturn and that kind of stuff, but bringing in compounds. We haven't even mentioned Stu yet, and you, again, another name.
Sorry, Stu.
Yeah, people don't even, may not remember. And Cannondale.
Well, they didn't know. It's not that they don't remember. They weren't here for it.
Right. And
they came after.
Cannondale Cyclocross World, just the giants of US cyclocross. Right. I mean, the biggest name.
Carbone,
for sure.
Barry Wicks. Right. I know. I don't
Raleigh.
I don't want to sound like yeah, I just want to, I think people can understand, if they understand the history, they'll understand better why it is the way it is right now and how to fix it. And so I don't want to sound like an elitist or like I was here first, and that makes me smarter or better or more experienced. But I want, if we're going to work on this, we do need to know what came before. And I mean, before we had the Super Cup, we never left our own regions. You raced in New England and you only raced in New England, and cyclocross looked a certain way according to what people in New England. For me, it was Tom Stevens. My cyclocross education came through Tom Stevens and his vision, and he was in charge of all the races. So, but he butted heads with Dan Norton in Seattle. And Seattle had an idea in the 90s of what cyclocross should look like. And every year we would go to nationals wherever it was, and everybody would fight about what cyclocross was. Well, this isn't real cyclocross because it's not what we do back at home. But it's because there was no cross-pollination. We never raced in each other's regions. When we started having UCI races, we finally had standards that we all had to abide by, that no matter what our terrain was, no matter what our weather looked like, what our venue was, we were all adhering to the same course construction guidelines. And we started to finally have a cyclocross that we all sort of could agree on. And you could start saying American cyclocross, even though the Northwest courses might be different than the New England or Mid-Atlantic or whatever, Boulder or Colorado courses based on terrain. But we were at least following the same format. I mean, we could talk about Cross Crusade and why Cross Crusade was so huge for so many years and how it's not now. And a lot of people are sad about what Cross Crusade is now. But now look at what they're doing in Seattle.
Yeah, MFG is
booming. Really, in my mind, there's two, back to like grassroots, right? Talking, the two big things that stand out to me in US Cross right now is MFG and what's happening in Seattle. We could do a whole podcast on that. That needs observation and analysis, a case study, and Portland Trophy Cup. And Portland Trophy Cup stands out to me because if you look at your top 10 list of the biggest turnouts, a goddamn Tuesday night, it's more than a training race, right? It's not a training race, but like the weeknight series. It's like the driveway for cyclocross. For people that might not mean anything, but like the Austin driveway, their Thursday night criterium is bigger than most of their weekend races. And that's something that's happened in road and cross and mountain bike as well, that as we've moved back to grassroots, people are doing their midweek events as their like feature. So PDX trophy is, I mean, the fact that out of 6 weeks, like half of them are in the top 10 of the biggest turnouts of the year. What are they doing right? Why is everybody showing up for that? And what is the vibe there? Yeah.
Like Mark, of course, from Chicago was also texting me saying, hey, I know we didn't have it last year, but I guess their weekly series is the same thing. And they're getting huge turnout for that. So, these other, that was one of the things with this data was like, yeah, I did work with Colin and like for the national, for the national stuff, I was able to use Cyclocross 24 as well, because they have really good starter data back to 2005.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
if you're not in that system, the numbers aren't there. And that's a good thing. That just means that there's more out there that I wasn't accounting for. Well, but you can even in your first data that you have access to.
Yeah. And even in your first couple of years, a point that I was going to make to you is, I think 2005 maybe is where you started. Not all the races were on cross results yet.
Because that was all new.
So even the data, I think, is probably light in those first couple of years. It takes a couple of years for everybody to have caught on. And like
that just makes where we are now, of course.
I've gone and looked, Cyclocross 24 has done a good job of like my old results are there. My results from the 90s are there, and that's like they really have gone at least back to 2000. And that's every now and then when I'm feeling nostalgic, I'll even look at my own results, be like, I forget some of the things that I did. I was like, oh, right. I did Zedam, anyway, it's a good archive there. But yeah, like the 90s, the Gina Halls, the Anne Grands, they're not on cross results, right? So I don't know how you account for people, those years.
Just don't just name names. Let's give some history.
Yeah. Right. You're asking for history?
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was rhetorical, but
no.
What I would say about the 90s that people should understand is, in particular, the women were among the best in the world, and we have gotten worse since then, even though we've had some standout, Katie Compton type performances. We consistently had 3 of the top 10 women in every international event in the era of the 90s and the beginning of the Super Cup series and having that series, the Cliff Bar team in particular, but Kona, Cliff Bar, Carmen DeLucio, who I think is Carmen Richardson now. I think she's no longer DeLucio. I think she was Richardson is her maiden name. Yeah, maybe it'd be worth looking at the Cliff Bar team in particular, but like women's cross wasn't as developed as it is now, but the Americans were trailblazers and the American women were the best in the world, and among the best in the world. And they could go from the US over to Europe and immediately compete and be in the top 10, even without being based there. You know, we haven't mentioned John Page. Like, John Page, like, you know, different than what Powers did. Powers always had to do a split program and he would do trips to Europe, but Page moved to Belgium. His kids went to school, elementary school in Belgium. He fully committed, got on a European team. And that was not an easy thing to do. But I say that all the time now, like, it's so easy to get sidetracked in a million different directions. So I apologize,
okay.
But like,
no, that's
every year after Worlds. Yeah. Every year after Worlds, I watch the month of racing that remains. And I wonder, where are all the American cyclocrossers? Where are the riders who want to be full-time cyclocross riders, professional cyclocrossers? How are you blowing the opportunity to do those February races where there's more space? They're still on TV. Some riders have, like, that's where they should be. So, you know, Page was there for that stuff. You know, he did the full season, right? He didn't race on the Athens Twilight was usually his first road event of the year. He'd race to the end of February. Oostmala was his last race. I think more American cyclocrossers should consider that, even though I know that that's not easy to do. And
it's not easy. It's also, you have like day restrictions that you start bumping up on, you know, being there if you want to go over for the whole World Cup and stuff like that. You know, it's
visa limits. Yeah.
It's all stuff that we're dealing with. Hey, one thing I wanted to touch on, this was the other thing that when you were like, oh boy, you know, when my data was wrong, and one of the things that you pointed out, you're like, hey, you know, Northampton's not on that list. And
that was like a side note, but
no. I know. But at the same time, that's what you mentioned, right? And I only bring that up because out of all of the data that I had in that article, the thing that mattered the most to people was that where their favorite race was ranked and if it was correct. And it was really interesting. Like, the pride and the provincial nature of cyclocross still exists.
Yeah. I think it's easy. Like, of course, I'm going to notice if my own race is missing.
I only bring that up to get into this conversation, but I just thought it was interesting. Out of all of the stuff there, all of this nationals data, all of this region, it really just hit home. The thing that is most important still is local.
And it's that. It's still there's some scene pride. Yeah. Right.
And I had people sending me stats and all this other stuff, and I was like, all right. And so I went by there and through. And even so, you know, one of the places that I screwed up, I didn't realize Treehouse was a 2-day event. So
right. It wasn't always, but it was this year.
Because it's called different things. Like the UCI ones are easy. It's day 1, day 2. That's easy to figure out.
Well, this is why Well, I would say this is why MFG is incredible to me. Because they generally only have one race a weekend. There are multiple series out there now. It's not just MFG. There's 3 different series that I'm aware of. There are series that are more or less working together and trying not to schedule over each other now. I know I pay a little more attention to what's happening in the Northwest because my girlfriend lives in Seattle. So like I'm paying more attention because I'm paying attention to her racing scene, but you know, I pay attention from a professional standpoint too. And I got to go, well, not last season, but the season before, I got to go out there for Magnuson Park, and I got to experience one. And it was like, the way I would describe it is like, it's serious about, I'll back up a second. The 2 poles of cyclocross used to be Boston and Portland, right? New England, Oregon, right?
Serious and weird.
And both of those markets knew, Brad Ross knew what his customers wanted and got a huge turnout because of it. And I think the generation of organizers before me used to argue with each other. And I hoped that what I tried to change during my regime was that we learn from each other, that we share resources, that we respect what's successful about what they're doing. And you couldn't deny what Brad Ross had done with the Cross Crusade. If that might not have worked in New England, because we take ourselves a little too seriously, right? That's not the vibe that maybe would work here. Those were good productions, but we would always be like, geez, they're marking their courses with flags. Like, those guys aren't serious, right? But 1,000 people would show up. So we needed to shut the fuck up, right? So you can't argue with that.
You'd be replacing tape every 2 seconds.
Yeah, like it's bullshit to not just pay attention to their success and why they're successful. That waned, right? There's administration change, and the races aren't as popular as they were, and then are organized in the same way. What I think MFG feels like to me is the mix of those two things. Seattle is more serious as a city, right? The vibe there is more like a big city. People they're busy, and they're productive, and so it's not like Boston. It's a very different vibe, but it's a quote unquote serious city. And that's not to say that Portland's not serious, right? But I think everybody understands what I'm saying here. And so Seattle seemed to have what's great about New England Cross, taking the serious things serious, and what is loose and enjoyable and fun and a little absurdist about Portland Cross in a scene that responds to that matches the personality of the folks that live there so perfectly. I'm always puzzled by city-based cross scenes coming from the East Coast, because we don't have city-based scenes. We have New England. Everything's close, and just like Mid-Atlantic too. You don't. Yeah. You have some regional stuff, but like,
no, I mean, we're DMV, Maryland, Virginia, and DC, all mixed together.
You and I are in the same megalopolis, right?
Yeah.
And so from Boston to Washington, there's nothing stops. It doesn't end. When you get west of the Mississippi,
that's why it was so sad that Grinnell no longer exists, because that was kind of the midpoint.
Right. So when you get west of the Mississippi and the cities are further apart, you get these city-based cross scenes. Mm-hmm. So for a city-based cross scene, Seattle's a big city, but it's not a regional cross scene, right? It's a city-based scene. To pull 1,000 people still for a one-day event in this environment is so incredible that we can't just copy what they're doing, because it might not work. But they've done a good job of creating events that match what their community wants.
For people who didn't read this article, and please go do CXHAIRS Bulletin. To put this in perspective, what Adam's talking about, Woodland Park had the most participants of any event in the country in 2025, meaning all of nationals put together, all of 2-day UCI races put together. Their one-day event was bigger than any of those. It's just mind-boggling.
In a city park. In a city park. They got permission to do that in a city park, and it's a beautiful park. I did a cross clinic in that park last fall, 2 falls ago, when I was there for the Hagens Berman Club, and I would love to get out there and do that race, but like, how hard it is to get permission to run cross races in city parks? Yes. And they do it in multiple parks in Seattle. Like, no, we all should be envious of what they have and emulating it in some way.
So staying in the Pacific Northwest, and also here's another thing that you and I always have to kind of educate people on, and this is USA Cycling's involvement in cyclocross. So the comments that come in here is like, USA Cycling needs to pay more attention to the West Coast. USA Cycling needs to have more races in the Pacific Northwest. We need to have. I know you're shaking. You're rolling your eyes.
God damn it!
You know exactly what this is.
Right.
And the thing is, at this point, well, you got 1,000 people showing up to a race. You got all of these people.
Not USA Cycling.
That is not USA Cycling. That is not USA Cycling's fault. And maybe it is. I should take that back, because there obviously is some friction there where they don't want to be part of that program. But you have like Team Booger out there, which is amazing, and has all of these kids that are coming up who want to participate in national level cyclocross, and they are, and they're doing a wonderful job. But if they had their own race there, that would be huge, and it would grow, and then it would be other clubs out there. And I know Zach, I know other guys, I know the MFG guys have their reasons, but at the same time, that's just the thing that I just wish we could come to some compromise. And again, this is not USA Cycling does nothing. The thing,
they're not race organizers.
How you have a UCI race in your city or your region is you say, I'm going to be a UCI race promoter.
Right.
That's what
people
you
understand
did.
It. Right.
That's what we did. And there we are.
Well, so I think we've all looked at the Northwest and thought, couldn't you guys do one UCI race weekend to get everybody to come to you? The part of why that doesn't happen, Brad Ross did do that, right? So there's a model for this. Brad Ross with the Cross Crusade said, I'm going to do one weekend in the Cross Crusade that is a UCI weekend, and you need USA Cycling licenses for. I can't remember if his amateur races were Obra at his UCI event.
And that's the
they may have been. Yeah, I can't remember, but it's good that you bring up Team Booger. And I think that I have my facts straight here. And if I misspeak, I hope someone will correct me. But last season, Team Booger did start putting some events on, and those were the Lemon Peel production events. So the third series, they were putting on some races, and those were USAC races for exactly the reason that you said. We all feel bad for Team Booger when they leave. And this is the problem when you're in a region that doesn't have USAC races, and then you want to race nationally. You go to mountain bike nationals, you go to cross nationals, places where your USAC points matter for staging in a way that impacts your turnout, right? And if you look at especially the masters on Team Booger, they're riders that can be in the top 5 or on the podium at nationals if they could only get a decent start position, which they don't get because they don't race USAC races at home. Well, they started putting some on. They did that for one season. I thought that was a great idea because you don't ask other people to do things. You just build the thing that you want to see. That's how I became a race organizer. They didn't do that last season. They did it 2 seasons ago. And then last season, they went back to being Obra or whatever they're getting their insurance. Probably not Obra, but they're unsanctioned. They're not sanctioned by USAC. So even they attempted it, and it wasn't, I don't know. I hadn't heard why, but I can guess that they didn't get the turnouts they want. It cost more than they want.
Yeah.
Not everybody in their region is going to race outside of their region. And that was always the problem with Portland Cross was if Northwest Cross, where do you go when you want to leave your region? And the jump from the local races there to the national races was always harder for people because they weren't part of a national circuit. But that's the trade-off, right? They could serve almost everybody else.
Need somebody as crazy as Zach McDonald to break out of there.
But I would love to see, yeah, sure. We would all love to see like one big weekend there. I mean, with the current trans exclusion rules, like I'm not in a position to recommend anyone do anything with USA Cycling. Even though I'm still organizing UCI race, it's a whole other separate conversation about why I'm going to continue to do that. But I look at what CRCA is doing in New York City, and they've removed their races from USA Cycling completely. And I really applaud them for that. And I hope other people who don't require international sanctioning for their race to be successful or bringing new races on to the calendar right now, really think hard about who they're going to sanction with and who they want their race to be open to.
Yeah. The other thing about it was just hitting because I said Zach, and so I was like, well, I should also mention Trebone and also mention Clara and all
right.
Of
that
came from this region and were like the fastest people in the country.
Logan. And part of what eased that transition for them, especially like in the Kona years, was there was a national series, right? And they
Team
could.
S&M does a great job.
And they're trying to do that now, right? They're taking riders out of the region to the UCI events, at least the riders that are eligible to do them.
We didn't even touch on nationals.
It's funny because the point of your article, not the point of it, but like nationals was what was driving you, and
it didn't even. It sort of like fell to the back.
Well, I actually thought you made so many other great points that nationals wasn't wasn't even the most important point in there.
I think it's we're like over an hour now, and that would be another hour. I think we could have another conversation because I have some. You and I have disagreed on nationals in the past, so I have some new proposals that we're gonna have to come back and relitigate.
Yeah, we've got some time.
Yeah,
we've got some months to go.
Yeah, I know this was sort of all over the place. We touched on a lot, but I think this was a good conversation. I think we,
you're right. We should talk.
Yeah,
we should have another call because like we didn't talk about this year's nationals even as like an analysis, like how was it, and then there's more to talk about.
I don't want to open those wounds for you again, Adam.
No, I finally don't. I don't think about it every day. I don't wake up. I was waking up for a while going, who died? Like that feeling of trauma. Like I would wake up in the morning, like what bad thing happened to me? It's like, oh, I just got crashed at nationals. It's fine. Yeah. And then I knew over time it would fade, and it has faded. And now there's just parenting to do and back to normal life.
Yeah, I know you've talked about it and everything, but I was just like, I've seen you after a lot of nationals and just never seen you kind of like from afar in that state.
Restraining myself and taking deep breaths. It was the kind of, not to get too into it now, but it was the kind of angry where like, you don't yell at your kid. You're so mad that you just talk very quietly and calmly. That's how mad I am right now. Yeah, it was like that. Anyway,
on a more positive note, no, thank you for taking the time to do this, and I'm excited to share the results I got from the survey. I think, as I said, I think the big takeaway is people have a lot of pride in their local scenes, and they really want to do what's necessary to rebuild that part of it and bring some fun in here. The thing is that will not surprise you, Adam, when I read through the 247 responses, everybody had an idea how to fix it. None of them were new, and none of them are going to happen without time, resources, and money. And that's kind of, and we didn't even get into industry and cyclocross and its complete abandonment of the sport and what the effect that has. But that's a whole nother can of worms as well. So
yeah. But let's not go another year without talking, right? Yeah,
we're still here.
And I probably say this every time you have me on, but like, we might not still be here without you, and I really appreciate it. Like, there's only a few of us that are really like flying the flag and keeping the flame alive. I didn't mix metaphors there. I sort of combined a couple, but like, the work that you're doing is important. The team that you're helping run is critical to the sport. There should be 10 teams like the one that you have. The podcast, the fact that you wrote the article, I appreciate you having me on. I always enjoy being a part of it. I'm grateful that, that it exists and that those of us who love cyclocross have a place that we can go.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, except thank you. But also I will tell you in all honesty that I do think about us having that conversation in the past. And even I think, and you even were like, well, I'm glad you're still here. And I kind of feel the same way about you. And I was thinking about that really after nationals up until I did this. And it's, you get in these places and I was at a point where I was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm done. I'm old. I don't feel like I'm old. I shouldn't say that, but been doing this a long time. And just like everything else, there's not that much happening behind to take the place. But I can say that the response that I got from this has kind of reinvigorated me, and I want to have these conversations again and try to figure out what we can do, because the sport is worth having, and we should do what we can to save it. Not save it, keep it going, maintain it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I think of it as like, now that I've been through so many cycles, this is just another cycle to wait out. And look, it's impacted my business, like traditional racing, the bike racing that I fell in love with, doesn't really exist anymore. You can't come into the sport in the same way, and the racing is different, and the sport is smaller. And so if the sport is smaller, that means I have fewer coaching clients, and I'm riding that cycle out too. And we all keep having our fingers crossed that the gravel racers will both hire coaches and start racing road and cyclocross at some point, and that's not happening as quickly as I had hoped it would. I still believe in that, but
yeah.
um,
I want
so
people to
yeah.
I want people to love competition again. I think that was part of the conversation that we had a couple months ago as well. And I think that maybe that's a Gen X thing. I don't know. I feel like, that just head-to-head competition. And then we had a lot of people that got into gravel who wanted an experience and wanted an adventure, which I completely understand. I want experiences and adventures too, but if I am going to go head to head with people, that's, throughout my life, that's what I loved. I loved competing. Was I going to win every time? No. Was I going to come close in cyclocross? No. But it's, that's the joy of the sport, is that I knew who I was going to race against and be there. Like Bruce Buckley, the photographer, him and I, we were like, when we raced, we were like head to head every weekend. And it was like, I just needed to know where fucking Bruce Buckley was. And if I could beat him, then we were good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because again, like we could spend another hour talking about this, but like when I first started racing as a teenager, I was also skateboarding a lot, and as committed to skating as I was to riding my bike. And after the first year that I raced as a junior, I was this is the year I turned 16. Was the first year I had a USAC license and like really tried to take it seriously. At the end of that season, I quit because I was like, this is stupid. Like, I do not care if I am better than somebody else. Like, I don't enter contests, like skateboard contests. Like, how do you judge who wins at skateboarding? Like, that's like an outrageous idea. And so the 80s punk me couldn't get my head around the sense of competition that came from bike racing. Like, it was against my values. And I found that same feeling really expressed in the Ciclista zine that doesn't exist anymore. And I'm forgetting the woman's name who wrote it, but like, the idea that like
Leslie,
the competition, like it was connected to politics, that like racing is capitalism, right? Like racing, like it's against my punk values to be competitive in that way. And why I came back to it and how I eventually got my head around that was I realized I could play the game of bike racing for its own sake and not attach my personal value to whether I was faster than, or whether I placed higher than somebody else on a given day. It's just the outcome of the game that I was playing, and I was able to detach the value from, and that opened up a career in game playing in the form of bike racing for me, where I do enjoy that competition, but it's very rarely, or I do my best to keep it detached from ego or other people, even though I know Bruce is your friend and that is like a friendly competition. You're not even, yeah. That's the only way I survived in the sport, with a punk mentality, with an 80s, DIY mentality, to do this like, yeah, directly competitive thing and not like ruin my soul doing it. And I think it's probably why I'm still here. I haven't found anything else that I like doing more than bike racing. That's why I'm a lifer. I thought I would do that when I retired. And so, yeah, that's part of why we're still here. I want to share that. I love bike racing so much that I'm making less money than I should. And, like I'm still making these sacrifices because I want to evangelize for the thing that I love so much. And so you're doing that as well.
I appreciate it, and I'm glad you're still here. And I think that just for me growing up, I kind of had that kind of a split personality where I did have that punk side and the music side, but at the same time I played team sports, and that's where that that came from sort of that sense of competition. And just, for me also, it's and I think you appreciate this as well, it's not just the competition, it's the process, it's the learning.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that I
chasing perfection in yourself.
That's why I'm doing this, or that's why Sven this, everything else, just analyzing stuff. Its process is like just so important to me, and that's kind of what we're still dealing with today.
Cross really lends itself to that, like you're constantly executing like these tiny little tasks over and over again, trying to go fast with the least amount of work possible. That's very enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Yeah. Adam, next month we're going to get on here and we're going to talk about nationals.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.